Hi, this is Ron Ford with Jacob Lenhoff Tours America. Today we're going to be discussing my books. I have 5 books out. They're all available on Amazon. First one I wrote was Hollywood Mortuary, a novelization of my movie. This one, The Masked Avenger versus the Kaiju Master, was commissioned by Alexander McCall, who has a comic book company in Canada. He created the Masked Avenger character and asked me to write a novella based on the characters. In this one, he travels around the world, this superhero wrestler guy, fighting giant monsters. Lots of fun. This one is my short story collection, Twisted Yarns of Various Lengths. It's each one of these was based on either a short film that I made or a script that I'd written that had that never got around to being filmed. There's also one poem in there which also became a film. My next book was The Grave Robbers. This one has a long history. We'll get into that when I get talking about it. But this is more of a mainstream novel. It's not really a horror novel. It's about a group of misfits in Hollywood in the 1950s making a horror film, running afoul of the HUAC committee and unions. And here's my only nonfiction book. I edited this King Succession. It's an examination of the Stephen King sequel films. I wrote probably at least 50% of these. I used a couple of pseudonyms in here as well, but I also edited it. There are many different writers credited. We cover every single Stephen King movie sequel. How did I become an author? Well, that came about from David Hayes, who was in my movie Deadly Scavengers, and he runs a splatter theater publishing. He's a prolific writer, and he loved Hollywood Mortuary. He wanted me to novelize it long before I did. He pressured me to do that. I've always had a knack for writing. I've always been, given a lot of attention because of my writing talent in school and whatnot. But I write a lot of screenplays and plays, and I just have never really got it. Never really mastered writing prose until recently. David Hayes, he eventually said, well, he'll write the book himself if he can get permission, and that got my creative juices going. I said, no, darn, my story, I'm going to write it. And so I wrote that novel. This here novel, it spans quite a bit on the original story. Fills in a lot of details and changes a lot of things for the better. Book I'm very proud of. It's very funny and very gory horror story. We're working on a graphic novel of it right now, myself and an artist named Zachary Keene. I'll put up a page of that so you can see what the artwork's looking like. What about being a filmmaker made me a better writer? Well, I'm very much inspired by my screenplays, my screenwriting. That's what I consider myself more of as a screenwriter. And nearly every fiction book I've written is based on one of my films or on a screenplay that was never finished or that was never filmed, rather. My books are extremely heavy on dialogue. That may be a problem for some. It's not for me. It's the way I write. That comes totally from being a screenwriter first. Which book am I most proud of? Well, it's going to be this guy right here, the short story collection. The first story is Dr. Jekyll in Love. You may have seen that film in my collection, Ron Ford's Monster History 101. That's a comical sequel to Jekyll and Hyde. Bit of risque story. Second one is The Raven. That is the poem. And here to illustrate that is the motion picture, the animated film I made of The Raven.
Once upon a midnight dreary, you've been told till weak and weary of the blackbird lately perching on Pallas's bust, above my door. How he set my soul with gloom, sitting in my silent room, choked with darkness, choked with doom, pining for the lost Lenore. How melancholy gave way to madness, thanks to his sole word in store. And that one word? Nevermore. I failed with the arcane arts to bring life to her once warm parts. Parts that once aroused feelings, unanswered now, forevermore. Nothing came of spell or tincture, save to make a dandy stink cure. A nice thing in a pinch, sure, when bird sits above your door. But mostly life was grim, depressing, deep to the core, with that bird's croak as its score. Sitting there upon my bottom, I wailed winter into autumn. Discomfort drove my memory clearer, finding my rear end was sore. Sorrow painted Lenore too great. Her nose in public she picked and ate. She'd clean me out on a date, then leave me lonely at the door. Lunacy gone, madness lifted, so, said I, to bird of yore, be gone with your nevermore. With soul well purged, well catharted, 's time my social life was started. Donning dancing shoes, I carted them toward the waiting door. Then my fingers on the handle, a rude mess fell on my sandal. Sooth, I cursed both heaven and hell, gazing high above my door. There the raven, perched he gloating, let me pass, I did implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. The nerve, you of lowly species, I said, wiping off the feces. To bar me from retreating out my only chamber door. My great gloom has gone expired. You have constantly conspired to give me grief, and now I'm tired of your gaudy metaphor. Then the raven, perched and gloating, turned his tail out once more. Quoth I to raven, nevermore. I reached the door and open flung it. Answered he, then with more dung, it hit me squarely, and there clung it to my healthy pompadour. I cursed the bird, I dethroned him with gross adverb and synonym. Black, dark, dank, and so dim, gaunt, ghastly bird whom I abhor. Knowing no oaths made to counter, save that one word, nevermore. The beast, he croaked that word once more. There I stood, I fumed and sputtered. Then his wings he flitted, fluttered, and launched himself, pecking, jabbing, decking me out on the floor. Rage could be no longer bottled. I took his throat, and I throttled, till his body, wrung and mottled, dropped its feathers on the floor. Madness claimed me, and I squeezed till my hands ran with birdie gore. The raven, he spoke nevermore. My life has now been turned around. I've sold my house and moved to town. A fine, unpretentious chamber with no bust above its door. And lost Lenore, have no doubt, I now take Annabelle Lee out. We date Dutch treat, and she puts out. We're legend on the ballroom floor. Best of all's my pet cat Pluto. 'Twas bought to keep, I implore. Out all birds forevermore.
And there you have it. It's complete dialogue from the, from the poem. The whole poem's in there. Next story was February's Choice, which was a vampire story, unusual vampire story. I originally wrote for the 1980s reboot of The Twilight Zone. I got a really nice rejection letter from Rockne O'Bannon, who ran that show, and he really encouraged me. It was like the first thing I written, and he said it was just a near miss. I was competing against Stephen King and Richard Matheson and people like that. So I should be very proud of myself, and I was. It led me to keep writing. It gave me a lot of confidence. The next story in here is Big Throbbing Thing, another rather risque comedy about a monster. Also, you can see that film in Ron Ford's Monster History 101. That's How They Get You. This was a short film I made for Kevin Lindemuth for one of his collections, one of the Alien Agenda films. And it's about a very religious guy who's his whole basis of life is religion, and it's a shock to its core when he sees a flying saucer and gets in contact with an alien. And the next story in here is Mr. Flap Flap. I believe that was a screenplay I wrote that we never made. Originally written for Randall Malone about a killer clown. I'm one of those guys that there are way too many killer clown movies. I really don't care for the genre. This is a little different. This is the truest horror story in here, and the truest horror story I ever wrote. It's about a kid who's afraid of clowns and a psychotic clown creature who's coming after him. Now I'm going to read a passage from Mr. Flap Flap, which I consider to be my more full-on horror story. Mr. Flap Flap launches himself into the kitchen. Simultaneously, the boy, acting on instinct, bolts to the refrigerator and throws open the door. He puts his back to the inside of the door and braces himself. Batong! The clown's momentum stops flat as he collides into the fridge door. His nose honks on impact. The dark room is now flooded with light from the refrigerator. The boy is hurtled by the force of the impact into the locked back door. The clown staggers back 2 steps, observing the dent in the refrigerator door, which is of course a concave replica of his own horrid face. He chuckles slightly, then falls on his bottom. There is another honk sound. His bulbous clown nose is now caved in. He feels his nose with an exaggerated expression of mock distress. The boy gathers himself and sees the clown nursing his wounds. He looks around for something to fight back with. He sees a set of knives in a wooden block mounted on the wall above him. He knows he will never be able to reach them. The clown puts a gloved thumb in his mouth and blows as hard as he can. His nose balloons back to its original bulbous form. Pop! He feels it to be sure it is right, and then smiles with pleasure and gets back up on his large feet. The boy runs to the refrigerator and pulls a coconut cream pie from the bottom shelf. He steps back. The clown starts forward. The boy launches the pie. Splat! With pie on his face, the clown stops, flabbergasted. He feigns blindness for a moment, staggering with arms outstretched. Then he makes a big show of wiping the pie filling from his eye and licking it off his fingers. He puts a thumb up and nods. Yummy. He starts toward the boy again. The boy snatches up his father's seltzer bottle from the lowest rack inside the refrigerator. He lets loose a stream of soda water. The clown staggers back as a stream of soda hits him in the face. He puts his hands up. It seems to hurt him. He is pinned against the wall, unable to fight back. Makeup runs from his face and down the front of his puffy costume. The boy feels a surge of power. It is working. Huge globs of clown white fall out of the crevices and pits in the clown's head. A falling mass of goo splats on his lengthy feet. The rubber nose falls off, revealing a gaping triangular hole. His rubber ears fall off, revealing horrid knots of flesh, the instruments of his hearing. It is a monster's face. The illustration you've seen in here, the picture of the clown, that is myself in an episode in the first season of Z Nation, the zombie television series, in which I played a clown zombie. After Mr. Flap Flap, we get Cold Feet, which you would also find in is part of my anthology Things 3, also known as Dead Time Tales. Is based on Mary Shelley's short story, The Transformation. Which book was the toughest one to write? Well, it's probably the one that also had the longest gestation period. The Grave Robbers. Now, this was the first screenplay I ever wrote. It was called B-Movie at that time, and it got a lot of attention. It did the rounds in Hollywood, never got made, but it got me the job writing The Fear, which was a 1995 horror film. Was a big hit on home video, and that was my first professional movie job. The producer I left that script with, he flipped over. He loved the script, but he said it wasn't practical. It wasn't a commercial project because Joe Dante's Matinee had just come out, and it was kind of a flop. I mean, it was a great film. It got great reviews. So he didn't think it would be practical, but he said, I will hire you to write something for me. And a year later he called me, and we did exactly that. And he hired me to write The Fear, which is pretty much the cornerstone of my whole career. This is a very special book to me. I should mention here that I have a new one coming out later this year. David Hayes' Splatter Productions, or Splatter Theater, is going to publish it, and it's a collection. It's going to be called Hollywood is Dead, the Ron Ford collection. It's going to have Hollywood Mortuary. This one, Grave Robbers, we're going to call it Hollywood Grave Robbers. It's going to have a third one called Hollywood Crematorium, which is basically an adaptation of my film The Crawling Brain, and there's a brand new short story in there based on a screenplay, a short film I wrote that I never made called Valentine Mortuary. That'll be coming out hopefully this October. What genre would I like to write that I haven't tackled yet? Oh, that's easy. That would be the Western. I did make one horror Western film called Man Without a Saddle. That was based on a Kipling story called Mark of the Beast. I have not adapted that to a short story yet because it was, it's a Kipling story. It would be sort of strange to do so. But I was just recently hired to write a Western novella. That same guy who put out Masked Avenger. He liked my book so much he's got a new company coming out, and he's got a lot of different titles. And one of them is a Western. I said, I kind of have a hankering to write a Western. So I'm waiting on the Bible for that character in order to start the story. Anyway, very much looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. He says it's a violent Western, it's pretty loose concept, so I can pretty much do whatever I want. So that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, thank you for listening. This is Ron Ford. I hope you enjoyed this survey, and maybe you can go to Amazon and check out some of my books.